My name is Marion Cole, and today is my birthday. That should have meant something, at least to my son. The first thing I saw this morning was a glowing screen. A post sitting at the top of my feed. Happy birthday to the best mom ever. It read, my son, Micah, was smiling with a champagne glass raised high, standing beside Caroline, his wife's mother. Behind them, a brand new boat gleamed under string lights. A banner draped across the deck with her name written in bold. I stared at that photo long enough for my coffee to turn cold. The words didn't bruise, they cut clean. Caroline. The best mom ever. Not the woman who worked through double shifts. Not the one who kept a roof over him. Not the one who sold her wedding bracelet so he could play ball. Then the second caption dropped like a stone. To Caroline. You deserve the world. I whispered it back, almost tossing iron. Because the truth slammed through me in one hard breath, the boat wasn't some rented backdrop. It was new. And I knew exactly whose money had made it possible. You bought her a boat with my rent money. The longer I stared at that boat, the more something inside me hardened. I opened my banking app, a place I had avoided for months. Maybe a year. The number sat there waiting. Clear as daylight, $75,000. That was the settlement from my back injury at the logistics company. The price of lifting one patient too many when no backup was on shift. I had told myself it was for Micah's future. Or for some emergency down the line. But standing there in my kitchen, I realized the emergency was mine. I closed the app with a steady hand and picked up the phone. My voice didn't shake when I told the real estate agent I wanted to see the cottage listings around the Vermont lakes. She rattled off 3 options. But the yellow one caught me immediately. Small. Sunlit. With a wooden porch and a dock, just wide enough for a single chair. A place that didn't need applause. A place that would never ask me to explain myself. 2 days later, I was standing on that porch, breathing in the clean air. The boards creaked under my step like they already knew me. I didn't hesitate. I signed the offer and said one word that sealed it all: cash. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finally cutting the cord that tied me to silence. Excuses. And birthdays that passed without notice. For the first time, my name was on something that couldn't be rewritten. I had chosen myself. The day I picked up the keys to the cottage, I brewed a pot of coffee and carried a mug out onto the porch. The lake was still. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until you finally breathe easier. I set my phone on the railing, angled toward me, and the water, and took one picture. No caption. No filter. Just me with the lake behind my shoulder. I posted it without a second thought and put the phone down. 3 minutes later, the screen lit up with Micah's name. It rang once. Twice. Then again. I let it go dark. I wasn't angry. I simply had nothing left to explain. More calls followed. 3 in total. Then the texts arrived. Short. Polished. Written like they were drafted for an audience. Let's talk. Call me to dinner Sunday. There was no mention of my birthday. No trace of regret. Not even a line that suggested he remembered what day it had been. Just control dressed up as concern. I read the words twice before slipping the phone into a drawer. I decided I would go. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed clarity. The picture had been for me. The silence that followed proved exactly who it unsettled. Sunday came with heavy skies. The kind that warned you not to expect warmth. I drove to Micah's house knowing exactly what waited inside. Caroline opened the door with arms stretched wide. Her perfume carrying out into the night air. You look wonderful, she said. But her smile was all performance. I stepped past her and into the dining room. The table was dressed in white linens. The kind of setting meant for photographs. 2 glasses of wine were already poured, waiting for me to take a seat. Micah hovered between standing and sitting, like he couldn't decide what posture would look better. Across from him, his wife Sloane arranged napkins with unnecessary precision. We began with salad. Small talk forced between bites. Then Caroline leaned forward, tilting her head. She mentioned the photo I had posted at the lake. Her voice light but edged. "It felt like a message," she said. I set down my fork and met her eyes. "It was," I replied. To myself, the silence cracked not by words but by a sound no one expected. Sloane's iPad, resting at the corner of the table, lit up with an airdrop notification. A message slid open. "Uninvited. For all to see. Miss our sunset prep. Your voice saved the night." The sender's name belonged to the private chef they had hired for their lake house gathering. Micah's face drained of color. Caroline's laugh caught in her throat. Sloane reached for the screen too late. The words hung in the air. "Indéniable." She mumbled something about planning menus, but the room already knew better. I didn't press. I didn't raise my voice. I simply folded my napkin and spoke evenly. "You're very good at staging moments. I've chosen to build boundaries instead." Micah shifted in his chair, desperate to redirect the conversation to money, to my cottage, to anything else. But the damage had already been done. The truth had slipped out without warning, and no amount of tablecloth or polished wine glasses could cover it. The morning after that dinner, I woke in the cottage with the sound of rain against the windows. The quiet steadied me in a way no conversation ever had. I walked to my desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. It was time to put things in writing. I drafted a notice to Micah. Simple and precise. I would no longer provide financial assistance of any kind. Every past transfer had been a choice, not a that. And that line was now closed. I brought the letter to a notary in town that afternoon. The stamp pressed down on the page felt like a door closing behind me. Next, I turned to the documents that mattered most. I called my attorney and instructed him to update my trust. My assets, including the cottage, would no longer be assumed gifts to bloodlines. They would pass only to those who showed up without celebration, who proved their care in the quiet spaces of ordinary life. Micah's name was removed as the automatic heir. A conditional clause was added. Not to punish, but to make the truth clear, inheritance was not a birthright. It was a recognition of presence. By dusk, the papers were complete. I slipped them into a drawer beside my bed, the wood still smelling faintly of new paint. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exact. For years I had explained myself, bent my back and my voice into justifications. Now all it took was a line of ink and a witness's seal. I didn't send a warning. Not yet. The documents didn't need noise. They only needed to exist. Micah showed up 2 evenings later. Unannounced. I was on the porch, a blanket around my shoulders, watching the lake turn silver in the last of the light. His car pulled up fast, gravel spitting beneath the tires. He walked toward me with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his eyes flicking from the boards under his feet to my face, never resting too long on either. He stopped a few feet away, the air thick between us. He said the house felt like a statement, dramatic and unnecessary. His voice cracked halfway, caught between anger and something close to pleading. I let the words settle before answering. I told him the real performance wasn't this porch or the paint on the door. The performance had been a birthday toast on a boat bought with money meant to keep a roof over his head. That was the spectacle. This was simply a choice. He shifted his weight, his jaw tight, and muttered that he only wanted the family image to look good. I met his eyes and said evenly that family is not an image. It is presence. I reached beside me and lifted a folder from the chair. I handed it to him without flourish. Inside was the summary of my trust. The clause printed clear. Assets to be given only to those who show up when there is no celebration. His fingers tightened on the paper, his mouth opening as if to argue. But no words came. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain further. I turned back toward the lake and added one line that ended it all. Intentions don't weigh as much as actions. The boards creaked as I stood. The cottage door swung shut behind me. The small wooden sign catching the porch light. Come in if you mean it. A week passed before the quiet was broken by a phone call I didn't expect. It was my niece, Tessa. She said she was driving through Vermont and wondered if she could stop by. Her voice held no agenda, just a trace of hesitation that sounded genuine. I told her yes. That afternoon, she arrived with a small bouquet of tulips wrapped in brown paper. She admitted she didn't know my favorite color, so she chose them all mixed together. I smiled and said that was exactly right. We sat in the kitchen with the windows open, the smell of pine drifting in. I poured 2 mugs of coffee and cut slices of apple loaf I had baked that morning. She took a bite, let out a breath, like it was the first warm thing she'd tasted in days, and then looked at me carefully. She said Micah had told the family I had moved out of spite. Her words didn't shake me. I told her simply that I had moved out of peace, and that there was a difference. I rose and opened the side drawer, pulling out the folder with the updated trust. I placed it in front of her and asked her to read the last line. She did. Quietly, her eyes glistening. To be given to those who show up when there is no celebration. She closed the folder gently and whispered that she hadn't come for money. I believed her. When she stood to leave, she hugged me without a word. That silence felt honest. That was enough. The weeks that followed moved with a certain sharpness, each one sealing the story tighter. Micah received the notarized letter first. His calls grew more frantic, then turned to silence when he realized there was nothing left to negotiate. The trust documents made it plain. If he wanted a place at my table, it would not be earned by bloodline, only by presence. Until then, his name carried no weight. Sloane tried to manage the fallout in her own way. The airdrop had not stayed a secret. Whispers moved quickly through her circle of clients, and contracts for events slipped through her hands. She never confronted me directly, but I heard enough from the edges to know her image had cracked. For someone who built her life on appearances, that was punishment enough. Caroline kept the boat, but not the glow that came with it. The community by the lake is small, and stories travel faster than water. It didn't take long before neighbors stopped visiting her boutique. Customers drifted elsewhere, and she was left sitting behind a register with no audience. The banner had faded, and so had her applause. As for me, I folded one of Micah's childhood drawings and placed it in a box. Not out of anger, but as closure. I wasn't erasing him. I was releasing myself. On the fridge, I hung nothing but a clean page. A space left open for whatever future arrived on honest terms. The cottage door, painted coral, caught the light each evening. The wooden sign beneath the bell swung gently in the breeze. Come in if you mean it. No reminders. Not performances. Just a boundary that held. And this time, I was the one who wrote the ending. A postcard arrived days later. Watercolor of a dock with a single chair. Tessa's handwriting curved across the back. It's peaceful where you are. I tucked it under a magnet beside the empty space on my fridge. That night, I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee. The lake reflecting the last of the light. The wind carried through the trees. Louder than any memory. Steady as freedom. The cottage stayed quiet. And so did I. Thank you for staying until the very end of this story. If you've ever drawn a boundary that cost you everything but gave you peace, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more revenge stories that close every door and open new ones.